My name is Jeremy Devins, and welcome back to the Quiet Mind Astrology podcast. In today's episode, we'll talk about trauma and how to work with it with Vedic astrology. It's a very deep topic, and I probably won't be able to cover all that encompasses trauma if you've experienced it. Many people have. Most people have some forms of trauma in their life, and you may have some very complex things that require working with a therapist and doing deeper work. But here in this episode, we'll look at some of the astrological things that we can see because there are some very clear patterns, and then how you can work with those in your chart. And if you want to go deeper into working with me, the next option is the Quiet Mind Yoga teacher training. Go to quietmind.yoga/YTT and sign up for the waitlist for the next teacher training, where we'll talk a lot about working with the body to move energy. And that's what I think is one of the first things I want to talk about with trauma. So I like this phrase, this idea of completing the throw. So, what is trauma? What is it in the body? How do you know if you have it? Well, if there's ever been an experience in your life where you had energy arise and want to move in your body, and then it did not for some reason, that energy is now stored somewhere in your body. You may have heard of this book, The Body Keeps the Score, or that phrase or that concept in working with trauma. And that is so true. And I've worked with the human body for many years now as a yoga teacher. And this is something I also offer in Quiet Mind Yoga. And so often there's like some tension in the neck or some pattern. Could be from a physical impact trauma, like a car accident or a fall or something. And now there's a impact on the body that is very literal and essentially life altering, where it's not something that you can just change, or maybe there's a surgery or something. Or it could be that the impact is more emotional, and that's more common. And for most people, the traumatic experiences are more emotional or energetic, in that something happens. Maybe somebody, a parent yells at you or shames you in some way, and that energy is an emotional response in the body, and that energy does not get to express, because if you were to get angry at a parent, then you lose your caregiver, and then you lose your home and you die. Right. So it literally is a life or death situation a lot of the times with these early childhood emotional issues. And then also it could be life or death for physical trauma as well. But I'm going to talk more about the emotional side of it, the energetic side, and how to work with that. But essentially, our nervous system, our whole body is working in these cycles of sympathetic to parasympathetic modes throughout the day. So, as you're listening to this episode, you're probably in a low level sympathetic nervous system mode. That's where we're alert, we're awake, we are moving, we're doing things, we're active. And at its higher end, it's like things like exercising at the gym, where you're pushing your body and exerting a lot of energy. That's more sympathetic mode. And then at its more extreme end, it's like very strong anger reaction, or very strong need to fight or flight kind of energy. That's like the kind of off the charts version of the sympathetic mode, where we've become dysregulated, right? So regulated is like we are kind of moving through these waves. Okay, I can be alert now. Okay, I can be relaxed now. I need to be alert now. I need to be relaxed. Driving in a car, need to be alert. Coming home at the end of a day from work, you want to relax, right? And sometimes it's hard to shift those modes, and it's hard to go down to relax when you want to relax. It's hard to wake up in the morning to be alert when you want to be alert, because your body's moving in these waves and cycles naturally. But a lot of times in our lives, we need to work on a schedule or kind of go outside of that rhythm and kind of override some of those natural responses. And that can become stronger and stronger. We're overriding these natural responses. And then when a traumatic thing happens, a big emotional event that kind of sets us off of that flow of sympathetic, parasympathetic, active, relaxed. Now there's a traumatic event, and now we are dysregulated. And we either go up into fight or flight, going to become aggressive, or I'm going to run away, or we drop down into deeper parasympathetic of freeze or fawn responses, where we shut down, or we shut down and then try to keep the peace and be really nice and try to sustain the situation and not get hurt, sort of thing. Right. So we all go through these experiences. Every day we are going through this wave of sympathetic to parasympathetic mode, alert to relaxed, alert to relaxed. And ideally, we're able to shift between those modes easily. Ideally. For me, yoga was the thing that taught me how to be able to do that, to be able to shift between those modes. For me, I was stuck in or the freeze response more often. And that's where there's something traumatic happening, something very difficult happening in my childhood, and not having the ability to fight or flight because of the situation. So I could freeze, I could shut down. And that is a response that happened in early childhood for me to adapt to the environment that was appropriate and helpful and helped me survive. But it becomes inappropriate later in life when in conflict in relationship, in healthy conflict of navigating a disagreement. And then to shut down and freeze, now that trauma has become a pattern and become stored in my body and become an issue in my current life at the time. Many years ago, I realized I was frequently freezing and shutting down. This might show up in relationship dynamics as the idea of stonewalling, of like the person's not sharing anything, but that's sort of a more negative version of it, and that sometimes there is that thing of somebody's actively shutting down as a passive aggressive a tactic, or it could be that somebody's stonewalling because they're internally shutting down and not having the tools to get out of that freeze response. Right. So just kind of looking at this overview of trauma, right? Your response may have been to fight, and you may find that when you're in conflict in modern situations or recent years in relationship or work or something, your reaction is to become bigger, more aggressive, because that maybe was a way that you adapted in past traumatic situations and it helped you survive. So you turn to aggression to as a conditioned response, and that helped you survive trauma, and it helps you adapt to current situations, but it can also become a big limiting factor in your current situations where that's not the appropriate response now. Right. So where is all this in astrology? Well, we can look to the early childhood is a lot of pretty much always where these things are developed, because it's so formative. Those first few years of life, there's so much happening. So many of the neural pathways are being developed and formed and shaping us throughout life. So I'm just showing a prajna chart here. This is just, we're just going to look at some prajnas. I, of course, see this a lot with clients, and clients come to me, and it's usually current day things that are the issue. Usually people don't come to me, or generally working with trauma, people don't bring that up to specifically resolve the past until it is now a problem in the present. And it will continue to be a problem going forward until the past is addressed. So it must be addressed somehow. And oftentimes people just repeat those patterns in relationships. And these neural pathways of how this is wired, how you're wired, how I'm wired, in response to a traumatic event, like something difficult happened, there's an emotional response, and maybe the appropriate response is to freeze or to fight or to flight. And in that time and in that phase of life and childhood or whenever, that was appropriate. And then it becomes a conditioned response, a samskara. Now that's like a neural pathway in your brain. When somebody's angry, I shut down. Or when somebody's angry, I fight back. Or when somebody's angry, I run. Right? Whatever it is for you, everyone's different. But you have that conditioned response. And now that was what was appropriate in the past might not be appropriate now. And now it's becoming a problem and maybe becoming a pattern of ending relationships or hurting other people or causing harm to others in some way because of this samskara, this pattern that is just automatic. It's not really conscious until it becomes conscious when we look at it. And astrology is one of the best ways we can look at it and say, okay, this is what the hand you've been dealt, the cards that you've been dealt in your karma that you're working with. And the phrase that my teacher used that really stood out to me is that family is inescapable past karma. So things that you're born into in your family, it's inescapable. It's just there. Like you've got to work with it in some way. So I'm just going to use this progeny chart as an example. Is if you're watching the video, I have K2 here in the first house. So the first house is what you're born into, and K2 is a detachment. So this person is born into a detachment from self from childhood. Just as an example of like how that might show up. If it was Pluto in the first house, that would mean they're born into an environment with a lot of instability because Pluto represents the subconscious and things that are shaking the foundation of our lives. And that would put that in the first house. That means that person and their body is going to go through a lot of ground shaking events, foundation changing events in their self, in their body, and in their early childhood. And this inescapable past karma of the family is often seen through these first few houses. So these, what I also, you could consider the childhood houses, like 1, 2, 3, and 4. The first house, a sense of self and the body keeps the score, as the book says, and that concept in trauma. So you may have experienced some physical or emotional trauma, and you think that, oh, that was just in the past, but your body is still holding that physical tension, and that needs to move in some way, right? So a lot of times in yoga, like working with clients, might be that they have a tension in their shoulder, and if we work on it with what I teach in my yoga training, the release method, basically it's self myofascial release or myofascial release techniques. A lot of times it's not just a physical release, but also an emotional release because the body had a reaction. Say somebody was big and scary and angry with you as a child, and your reaction was to freeze and hold tension in the body. Whereas the appropriate response might have been to yell back in that moment or to run away, but you didn't have anywhere to run to, and it was too big and scary to yell back because you could get hurt. So the energy moves in the system and it gets stuck in the body. Energy uh, is just constantly moving through all of us, right? It cannot be created or destroyed. It just changes forms. So it changed forms into anger in a caregiver and then into tension in your body as a child, and it stayed there, didn't come out. If you look at animals in nature, like say a dog, when they experience a scary, unsettling event, what do? They get away from it and they shake it off. And they've had this release of that tension in the body. What do we do as humans? We have a scary, difficult event. We get tense and then we just hold on to that tension unconsciously and go on with our lives. And I can guarantee somewhere in your body, there's some part of your body that is holding tension right now that you might not even feel. And if you go into a session with a body worker, they'll find it. A good body worker will find it. Or if you do a self myofascial release session for yourself, you'll find it. So this is a daily thing. Like it's never done. It's like as long as you're alive, you've got some tension in your body somewhere. There's something that happened yesterday. This may be a little thing. Maybe you read some stressful thing about politics or something on your social media or whatever. Somebody said something to you that was a little bit off, and you might have felt consciously, oh, whatever, or your body might not have felt anything that you observed, but there's probably something there. Or maybe it's just the repetitive stress of like you're sitting at a desk all day. So your body's holding tension from that, and it's not such a traumatic thing. But that's still that tension. Where we hold that tension, there's sort of patterns based on our samskaras and our past traumas. So your body is this system, this very complex system where there's probably some tension in it right now that if you kind of feel around, maybe in your shoulders, maybe in your hips, these are common, maybe in the back, the feet. These are all very common places where there's probably some tension right now. And if you're alarmed by that, maybe you get out a therapy ball, like a tennis ball or a golf ball, and roll on your foot a little bit, or foam roller on your back. Do something, just even just a couple minutes has a huge impact on releasing this tension. And that's moving that energy, which is stored and can then come out and repeat the cycle to someone else. So your mom got angry with you, then you get angry with your child, and so on, right? And it just repeats this cycle. Or your mom got angry with you, you held some tension in it, it was a traumatic experience as a child, you held on to it, and now as an adult, you consciously choose to release it, and you feel a little more relaxed in your body, a little more in the parasympathetic mode, and a little more forgiving, a little more compassionate, patient with your children. And now you're not perpetuating that particular trauma and cycle. So what is it? Is it trauma? Is it just tension? Is it pain? Well, trauma is just a little more complex, I think, and it's like bigger, and it's something that is bigger than yourself that needed to be moved and it didn't get to move. That's the definition I'm working with here. There's lots of different definitions. And I'm thinking of it in that way of like some sort of big event dysregulated you from your flow of active to relaxed, active to relaxed. Oh shit, what just happened? How do I respond to this? Now you're off the charts of that flow, and that's the traumatic event. And then how do you respond to it is determining whether it gets stored in your body, you repeat the cycle, or you shake it off, you move it, and you complete the throw, right? This idea in trauma, I really like this idea of like, let's say you imagine a pitcher in baseball and the amount of energy and force that's required to throw a ball at like 90 miles an hour in very targeted, directed energy at a specific spot is a lot of energy. And you imagine winding up full power and you're about to throw and you stop it. Like you force your body to stop that throw right before you release the ball. And that is one way that's often used to describe what trauma is. It's like something happens, you build up all this energy to respond to it, and you don't respond to it, and you don't shake it off. And then you just try to go about your life from there. And that energy is still in the body somewhere. Maybe hold this tension in the neck or shoulder or the back or the arm or whatever. So a part of healing trauma is completing the throw. So where that energy was not expressed, you get to express it. I really like work like family constellation therapy. If you've ever done this, I think it's amazing. Highly recommend. If you haven't done it, find it. That's great. Any sort of therapeutic work with trauma therapists is great. If you have got complex trauma, complex just means there's like a lot of layers to it. It's not just a one time my dad did this thing and now I have this response. I didn't get to respond. That's just one traumatic event. But the complex would be like there's layers and layers of these kind of things. So anyway, when you have that, it's very helpful to work with some sort of container, therapists, coaches, these kind of things. But completing the throw is like you're getting to express that energy somehow. And to me, again, I think yoga is the most powerful way to get to practice this, to practice regulating the nervous system, to go up and down, to move energy through the body. When it arises, when I find it, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that was there. I have a space to move it. So for me, yoga was such a saving grace, such a healing place to get to do a lot of this work, to release a lot of these things. So I recommend that. I talk about all the time. If you want to go into the yoga world and do this kind of work with me, the next Quiet Mind Yoga teacher training is starting soon. You can go to quietmind.yoga/YTT and join me on this journey. A lot of the research points to that is the best method of working with trauma as well, because so much of it is about nervous system regulation, and so much of trauma is about what happens when you're dysregulated. When you're off the scale, something happens, throws you off of your regulation. And for me, a lot of that regulation meant learning how to be in the sympathetic mode, which is slightly less common. For a lot of people, yoga is learning how to be in the parasympathetic, learning how to relax, let go. I had to learn how to get comfortable being more active, being firmer, being angry, having healthy anger. It was like a big lesson for me, a big challenge for me. So to complete the throw for me, actually was learning how to do things like vinyasa yoga or ashtanga yoga, push my body, be active, strong, present, engaged, muscular, fit, and express anger in a healthy way, and express physical effort in a healthy way. So that was my journey. Everyone's journey is a little bit different. But the chart shows your karma. It shows past life karma. It shows family karma. It shows trauma. It shows the early childhood. All these things can be seen. So a lot of times, some big factors in this are Pluto, the first four houses, the Dushtana houses. These are houses 6, 8, and 12. And then lots of other little factors like certain conjunctions, things like that. The dashas you're going through, Sati Sati, Saturn return, these kind of things can point to it. Pluto over the first four houses and transits. These are some of the things. So I'm going to talk about a bit about each of those a little more and kind of show on the video some ways that might show up. So in this chart, I'm showing the example like K2 in the first house, there could be a detachment from self from early childhood, and that could be a freeze response or a flight response in early childhood. So I would think that this person learned to put a lot of attention on the other in early childhood, Rahu in the seventh, which can point to codependency issues and putting a lot of energy into managing other people, which also could be a fawn response. So this is less of a fight response, right? This is there could be the other ones, but very much less of the fight response because K2 in the first house wants to get away from the self, get away from the childhood, and focus on the other and taking care of the other, Rahu in the seventh. But I'm just going to rotate the chart to show these examples today. So this really helps to have the birth time for this. You can do a lot without the birth time, but it really does help to have that. So if I just move things around, so we end up having Pluto in the first house. This chart here is a good example of some of the more complex things. All right, so you have Pluto in the first, Saturn in the second, Rahu, Neptune in the third. First three houses, early childhood. First house, yourself, your body you're born into. Second house, very early childhood. Third house, like you're getting to school, early development, friends, all that. Fourth house is the home, right? So you start to put these difficult energies in there, you're going to have difficult things happen in those places in your life. Pluto in the first house is constant instability, constant challenges in the childhood. Where's the foundation? What ground can I stand on? It's difficult stuff, right? It can be very disturbing to the childhood. Saturn in the second, as an example here, Saturn brings restrictions, discipline, limitations in the second house. That is now a restrictive childhood, strict parents, feeling very disciplined, restricted, held back. You need to break away. You need to get away from that to find yourself. It feels like you're a bit suffocating in this childhood. And part of the trauma you may experience there is to do with these kind of issues. Rahu in the third with Neptune, there could be a lot of lies and deception in your early childhood and addiction around you in the childhood. And the friends you start to make and that you grew up with maybe start to get into addictions themselves and they kind of pull you into this addictive world with Rahu being addictions. Right. So these are just some examples of how this can show up. And these traumatic events would happen with like Pluto in the first, like suddenly you move, or suddenly there's a big breakup with your parents, a divorce, separation. These big, sudden, ground shaking events that change you subconsciously and on a deeper level. If you had Jupiter in the first house, you're protected in the childhood. Now, there might be other factors that point to other traumas, but generally, like benefic in the first three houses is going to give you some protection in the childhood. Or you may have, it's more complex than that. You have Pluto in the first, but then also Jupiter in the first. So constant instability, but there is some protection there. Like maybe you've got in your home is difficult, but you've got an aunt or uncle you can go to and feel safe, or a grandma or grandfather you can go to and feel safe. So there is some protection there still, even though there is the instability. So lots of factors to consider, but these are some of the things that I see commonly with charts of like these kind of energies in the first three houses. There's definitely going to be some early childhood stuff. And then a lot of times that stuff is like, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to look at the past. Like, why do I got to keep talking about the past? Well, it it becomes an issue in the present moment when you're trying to have a relationship, and then the past is keeping you stuck, right? So then you do need to address it. And then the Dushtana houses 6, 8, and 12. If you got those malefic influences there, again, same thing. Eighth house is transformation, is constant change. 12th house, losses. You're going to have constant losses in your life. Sexual abuse can be very common in these 8th and 12th houses. Sixth house is health issues, right? So it's you're looking for the malefic influences, trying to interpret them in these particular houses and seeing how this could show up for you throughout your childhood and throughout your life. And then basically the thing to learn is how to regulate your nervous system, how to complete the throw, to go into those things where you didn't complete the throw, and then have a space where you can express what you needed to express. The feelings you felt, the hurt you felt, maybe through some somatic experiencing, therapeutic work, or even just through yoga of learning how to regulate your breath and your body and your mind. This is a place where you can do that safely and move that energy. So it's a deep topic. There's a lot I can say, but we'll leave it at that for now. And if you get a reading with me or you go into working with astrology with me and you want to go with this deeper, just ask about these things, these more difficult planets and these more difficult houses and some of these traumatic factors. If you're working with complex trauma or childhood trauma or things like this, I do recommend finding a therapist or family systems work or a family constellation work that you can work with this stuff. It's not simple. It could take years. It could take a session. Facilitated psychedelic experiences can be very powerful for this as well. But long term, most sustainable, a daily embodiment practice is the thing that I highly recommend. Yoga, self myofascial release, these kind of things, I think are phenomenal. And all the research points to that is the best way to work with trauma. And for myself, it has been. For many clients I've worked with, it has been. And if you want to go on that journey with me, go to quietmind.yoga/YTT and sign up for the next waitlist for the next Quiet Mind Yoga teacher training. And we do this kind of work there. It's very deep, very important work. And imagine a world where we're all doing that. I think it's a beautiful dream vision that we can share. So next, I'm just going to talk about briefly some of the transits happening this week in astrology. So if you're watching the video, you can see that. The big thing is the lunar eclipse. I'll have a full episode just on that coming up soon. But on Friday, September 13th, Mercury in Purva Falguni, and that is in Leo with the sun. So Mercury in Purva Falguni, great time for doing fun things after this heavy topic of today's episode. A good time for finding where you feel carefree, talking about things that you care about, bringing some more lighthearted energy into your life right now with the sun and Mercury there in Leo. Sun will move into Virgo very quickly here on Monday, September 16th for its monthly stay in Virgo, bringing a great time to analyze things, to understand ourselves, to learn any topic you're curious about. Great time for communication, healing work as well, Sun in Virgo. And great time for doing anything to do with health and wellness from September 16th until October, mid-October. So I'm a Virgo rising. Listen to my podcast a lot. You'll get a lot of the Virgo vibes. Clean your house, organize things, clean out a closet, get rid of things you don't love. Virgos love to clean and organize, systemize, simplify, minimalize, get rid of stuff you don't need, don't love, keep the things you do love, and take care of them really well. That's the Virgo energy. September 18th, the lunar eclipse in Purva Bhadrapada. Eclipses are portals. It's a time to transition into the next chapter of your life, the next 6-month chapter. And it's about letting go. And it's in this energy of Purva Bhadrapada in Pisces, of where we are becoming more spiritual. So moving into your more spiritual, mystical expression of what you really value energetically. More on that in the next episode. And then Venus in Libra in its own sign, such a sweet energy on September 18th, also on Wednesday, getting out of Virgo. So Venus in Virgo, a time to analyze things and understand and learn about yourself. Venus in Libra, a time to love yourself and love others. Do things that you love. That's part of with the Mercury energy too. If you don't love it, let it go. And if it's something like a person, person in your life, find the love, find the compassion, find the kindness. And if you can't, if there's something blocking it, maybe it's something in the past to be healed, some trauma to go into from the past that can be healed so you can be more present now and loving now. And so much of the work of healing trauma is to be able to be present, to be current, to complete the throes of the past so you can be present for the throes of the present and now. Right. I have this in my mind, this very Virgo way of looking at it too is, am I current? Right. Is there something in the past I'm holding on, some resentment, someone I haven't forgiven, something from yesterday I haven't cleared? Can I clear that? Can I become a clear vessel today? Lord, make me an instrument of your peace, right? That great prayer of St. Francis that I love. Uh, Make me an instrument of your peace. And basically, where there is injury, let me be kind to others. Where there is not compassion, let me be compassionate to others. First with myself and then to others. Like I mentioned in the last episode, relationship to source, relationship to self, then relationship to others. We practice that through yoga. Venus is a great energy of yoga. So practicing yoga, mindfulness, meditation, great time for healing and loving. Venus and Libra, such a wonderful energy. So more to come about the eclipse as the moon is being covered by the earth in a couple of days. A reset, an opportunity to reset and start a new chapter of your life next week or this week ahead. So thank you for listening. Look forward to sharing more with you next time on the Quiet Mind Astrology podcast.